Okay, so from everything that I hear what you're saying, the reason, let's just say your generation has a hard time with the word sacrifice is it's negative at the outset because there's a cost to be paid and it makes it not sound good. I don't want to do something, or it doesn't appeal to me to do something when I know this means there's a cost to be paid, right? Or would you rephrase it another way?
It's yeah, that's almost right. Yeah, the way we perceive sacrifice is in a negative connotation due to, for some of us, just the very notion of a cost existing. That in and of itself is already a deterrent for many people. Like I've heard that as a common complaint as to why people don't join the church. They're like, yeah, your Jesus is cool and all, and you guys have a great ceremony and you guys got great morals, but something sacrifice, and I'm out. Like, I don't gotta sacrifice anything, and there's either a misunderstanding about what sacrifice means, or the notion of a sacrifice at all is fearsome.
Okay, let's look at this in light of what it means to grow into selfless sacrifice. And it's interestingly enough, there's a parallel with the Eucharist, and this is something even I'm reckoning with now and to try to understand all its intricacies. Now, let me explain to you in light of what Catholics believe the Eucharist is, and make that parallel. And I think it's supposed to be made in order for us to understand sacrifice. And what I mean by that very specifically, with the Eucharist, it has three dynamics, three significances: presence, communion, and sacrifice. Presence, communion, and sacrifice. And I'll explain it simply in the light of marriage. And again, the Eucharist symbolizes this: presence, communion, and sacrifice. In marriage, a man goes out with a woman and just he's content, and he starts just being in her presence, and he enjoys her presence. And that's what it's supposed to be. That's where it starts, right? You just enjoy another person's company. Now, what happens when you enjoy that, you enjoy their company and you get to know them deeper and you grow in love for them, what happens is you want to become part of that person, and you want that person to become part of you. In other words, you want to sort of fuse yourself. You want to be in liturgical terms, we just say that's communion, but you want to be like fused. You want to be united, right? That's the desire of spouses. I become you and you become me, sort of reciprocal thing. But you see, then you grow deeper, and then it's like, yes, we do that. We still have presence. We have communion of becoming each other. But then third, it matures to a point where one loves to the point of giving and sacrifice to the other, such that one's pleased in their desire, or rather, if their desire has been fulfilled, to manifest their love and sacrifice, even if the other person, doesn't even know what's going on. In other words, it becomes a great personal, for someone who truly loves another, there's just a simple, deep personal satisfaction in knowing that you've sacrificed for the other. Again, even without the other knowing it. One of the reasons why people aren't making that selfless act is because they haven't spent the adequate time being in presence and being in communion. See, what happens, you need all of them. Now, granted, the sacrifice is the perfection of it, but you can't make a relationship about, oh, I'm just sacrificing for you and you're sacrificing for me. I've seen marriages fall apart. In other words, women will sacrifice a lot and really sacrifice and do a lot for the family. And the father will really sacrifice, being out there working hard. He'll really sacrifice. And yes, is he showing her love? Yes. Is she showing her love? Yes. There's a problem. They may not be spending time in presence. And they aren't spending time in that reciprocal communion. So on one level, while it is in some way maybe heroic on another level, to say that, well, I am making great sacrifices, and that's really what we need to get to. That may be true, but if you're still not spending time in presence, and if you're not spending time in communion, really trying to like reach into the other, which takes presence, right? And really surrendering, trying to become the other, not just serving the kids. And this is where marriages fall apart, because what happens today, and this is why the church even teaches that couples should be living together. They need to be habitating together. Why? So they're in their presence. And I have a friend too, his marriage fell apart because his wife had to spend her time away from the home for other family things. Now, I've seen this happen other times too. A woman will leave maybe to take care of her mother or her father or something like that, or a relative. And they spend so much time apart that if you spend so much time apart in presence, then you'll tend to devalue the relationship. Let's put it that way. You've got to be in company to keep the relationship strong. Okay, normally speaking, unless you're like some kind of heroic saint or something, which it's possible too. But that's not normal. That's abnormal, right? That's not of the norm. Couples should be together. And so, right now, as you're looking at this, you're still trying to figure out the sacrifice thing. Well, a lot of these things of self-sacrifice, so for example, even as I said to you, look, the desire of the one who truly loves is willing to be selfless and sacrificing for the other. That still becomes intelligible, and it will become unintelligible if you haven't first spent sufficient time in presence and sufficient time in intercommunion, let's call it. Even though communion, you don't have to add the word intercommunion as such. But in other words, I'm sharing myself with you to become you. You're sharing yourself with me to become me. Okay? If you're not doing that, then understanding how, realizing, not just understanding with the head, but realizing with the heart and your being, you'll never get to that point of desiring to sacrifice for another unless you've kind of anchored in those first two stages. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's where you grow. That's where you come to realize it. You come to realize that you want to sacrifice for the other person selflessly when, after you spent all that time in presence, and then you spent a lot of that time in intercommunion.
Right. Yeah. It's the communion part is where I've noticed that the presence part is where it makes sense for most people, even secular people, because they know that you got to spend time together to actually know if this is going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then in communion, within the marriage, right, it's a lot of that phrase you said where, like, I share my love with you to become you, and you share your love with me to become me. That, like, I know a lot of people that would take that literally and say that there's like there needs to be like a personality change or something, but you're talking about that in the aspect of like the whole the two are now in one, right?
Yeah. And what'll happen, Daniel, is that every relationship has its own character, just like every family develops its own character that's similar in general to others. There's certain general dynamics, but specifically it looks very different. So for some women and men, it will be different. It'll even be different with a different person. What you'll understand is surrender yourself to another to become them, and for them to surrender themselves to become you. It could be under a completely different dynamic and different act than another marriage. This is why it's so not good to sometimes compare the way other couples interact, because it's not, maybe that's not the way you're meant to interact with your own spouse. Does that make sense? In general, yes, but specifically, no. And this is where, okay, so if that's true, then it's the journey you share of discovering all that you can by spending time with each other, being in presence, and discovering, we'll even say even like experimenting or trying to yield and trying to figure out and try and attempt what it is to surrender yourself to become the other person, for the other person to become you. You grow into it. It's not like, oh yeah, okay, got it, Dr. Phil. Presence, communion, sacrament. Okay, I'm good. Okay, that's all I need.
It's not
I
just a
just,
checklist. That's
yeah,
like a one and done deal.
yeah. I just plug in the formula. I'm good. My marriage is going to last. No, it doesn't work that way. It's a process. Even though I don't like the word process, or women like the word, and I think it is a cool word. You ferment journey. See, one of the things you have to understand in marriage, men and women, they're wired differently, obviously, right?
Right.
But one of the ways they're wired differently, a man will look at his marriage and say, or he might be taken with all the love thing, but soon after that wears off, and he'll look at everything objective. Okay, what's she doing? How are things being accomplished? How close are we to getting a house? When will we be taking our next vacation? Okay, how are we going to work out getting the roof fixed? So he'll navigate his marriage about what's to be accomplished. And he'll see his marriage about the landmarks of where they're at. Oh, after 5 years of marriage, we're able to take that great European vacation or whatever, or when the kids are all out, then we could take the 3 months in Europe we've always talked about.
Right.
So he'll see his marriage in light of all these landmarks and things to be accomplished, right?
Mm-hmm.
She'll see it naturally, and if she's mature, it's just that you're together in a journey of life. And this is why women are generally more spiritual than men, because they have the right spiritual navigation. Yes, you're here to be in company, and you're here to journey together. So women, in the order of nature, they kind of get it. Men love the presence thing in the beginning, but that for them that wears off. For women, presence doesn't, unless they're really engaged in their careers or something, or really taken away.
Right.
Most women appreciate and like to spend time in relationship. Okay, unless something goes wrong. Okay, but most of them, that's their dynamic. Men, it's like, honey, do we really have to spend this? Do we really need to go out every week? Do we really need to do this? And say, hey, we're good. I'm good. Can we just, watch a movie?
As much to be satisfied from a biological standpoint. That's more of a chemical thing in the brain than anything. But yeah.
For men, you mean?
For men, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. But for women, okay. So one of the biggest mistakes men make is they don't realize that need of women. This is where marriage gets a little hard, because you got to put in that time for presence, and you don't want to spend that time. You'd rather, well, hey, there's this program I need to listen to, and I don't know if I really want to spend time with Mary, but okay, I need to,
Yeah.
So men need to understand that they need to be in communion with their wife. Not only that, not only to please her, but if they don't, they're going to lose her. They're going to lose her. Now, they may not lose her in a divorce, but they could lose her in terms of respect or honor or care or whatnot. So it's so important that people, as we say, maintain that relationship with presence. So.
Okay. And then in regards to the sacrifice thing, just to bring it all back, you said something about how the sacrifice is to be selfless at some point or another. And it's like, I guess, how does it get to the point where it's truly selfless, and why does that selfless part matter? Because that implies a lack of calculating a cost to everything. Why should I not calculate a cost?
Okay, true love is, even in the scholastic sense, it's the willing the good of the other. Now, in an ancient sense, when you willed something that was good, it means you also accomplished it, right? It means you just don't will and have goodwill for somebody, but you actually, in fact, accomplish it, okay?
Your will is an action that has been done.
Well, it presumes that the action's going to happen. That's what we call love, willing the good of the other. Now, your wife may say, well, love is when you fulfill the actual good of the other, not just willing it. Now, but that's presumed in the definition. In a classical sense, maybe not in a modern sense, but a classical sense, it's sort of presumed that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, where am I going with that? So when you love and will the good of the other, and that becomes their most important thing in your life, their good and not your good, when you truly love them, then you'll do what it takes to accomplish that good at the expense of your own good, or the pursuit of your own good. When you love, you're happy to do that. Or you may not be happy to, but you're fulfilled to do that. See, in a deep sense of fulfillment, it's a better thing than just being happy, right?
Yeah.
You're fulfilled in knowing that you're giving yourself to the other. And certainly when you're spiritual, then you understand that's a great offering to God too, right? So that's how you become selfless. But remember, I can teach this all to you mentally, and you can say, okay, I get the connections. I get these connections. But you only really grow in it when you're in it. In other words, you don't feel that. You could say, well, look, Dr. Phil, I understand what you're saying, but I kind of don't connect personally with this idea of surrendering my good or making sacrifice. I still kind of count the cost. That doesn't bother me because it's something that you live and move and grow into. And that's why it's important to kind of understand that at the outset, to be prepared. That's why in marriage prep, you try to prepare couples for on the truths of relationship, got it. But you prepare them for problems which are foreshadowed in the future that you'll run into if you're not properly conducting yourself in your marriage. Okay, that's why this is so important. But it's sort of like, I want to give you another analogy, and I think this works. It's on the level of faith. Now, as Christians, you're not in Christ in a full sense if you're not willing to give of yourself to be crucified for Christ. I don't really know if I want to be crucified.
Sounds uncomfortable.
But to be a Christian, a follower of Christ, means you're willing to die with him. Now you could say, yeah, but I don't have it in me. But I've learned to myself, if you move in love with Christ, one of the things the church teaches, if you're called to martyrdom, you'll get the grace to fulfill that martyrdom at the time you need it. Does Daniel Naden have the grace of martyrdom? No, you don't. But if you're called to be martyrdom at that moment, then you'll get the grace. That's why we call it an actual grace, because the grace is only there at the time you need it. So you got to trust, and this is what marriage is about. Marriage gives you grace. Okay? So you got to expect that to fulfill these hard tasks in marriage. The grace is given through the sacrament. That's why we have a sacrament. It gives grace. Why? So we fulfill the duties of the marriage, right? And so you have to trust that when you're married, God, I know you'll give me the grace when I need it. And it's not, maybe not feel great, but he'll give it to you. And so the Christian journey is a constant surrender. Understand God's grace will come. And that if you grow in love and journey together in love, the grace will come and it will flow. And yeah, sometimes you're going to feel the pain, you're going to feel the sting, but less and less you'll count the cost until you'll get to hopefully level of perfection where you don't count the cost at all. So there's a journey here. Just because I can explain it to you to a certain satisfaction doesn't mean you've realized it. So this is where you have to have faith in God, his plan in human nature, and good sound teachings on marriage to keep you working in the right mode. Always navigate in the right way of conducting yourself in marriage so that it can last. And you can grow into the person and the couple that you're meant to be.